Alright, now in this next series of videos I'm going to show you exactly how I made this kitchen and storage unit for my new camper van. What can I tell you about this? This is cabinet made in the workshop and installed in the van pretty much in one go. Now, as I say, this was quite a complex build, and I think we're going to take over 3 videos to actually explain in detail how this whole thing was made. Now, in this first video, what I'm going to do is show you the plan, which I always work from a plan, and I like to draw a fairly accurate plan before starting to cut wood and things like this. So in this first video, we're going to take a look at the plan, and then I'm going to show you exactly how I made the carcass or framework for this. As I say, that's done in the workshop and then installed in the van. So that will be the first part of the first one of this series. Secondly, we'll get into making the drawers and the door fronts. And then lastly, we'll look at how we did the worktop, how I made this tap and the sink, and installed the whole thing into the van. So, series of 3 videos coming up, and here's the first one. So this was my starting point for this. It has changed a little. I've gotten rid of this drawer here and I've brought the sink further down. We're going to make this in 2 sections. We're going to make this bottom section, and then I'm going to make the top section, which will fix onto it once in the van. That's just going to make it much easier to get in the van in one go. This I'm going to make mainly in the workshop. Now, the construction method for this, these battens, this is all made with this type of material. This is a 44 by 18 planed square edge, and these are the battens here. Now, what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to router a 6mm channel in there, and then the partitions for this are going to be made from 5.5mm plywood. This will all be very lightweight, extremely lightweight, but it'll also be very strong. And we're going to slide that plywood into there. First thing we want to do here again is a cutting list, and I'm going to cut these battens, the length battens. I'm going to cut some of the uprights. Okay, so I have these set up ready to router. These are all of the uprights and cross members. Set the router up. Obviously got a stop on here, so this will be centered, and it's a 6mm bit, and there's 5mm depth of cut here, and that'll be enough to slide the plywood backing in. Okay, so I have all of these now routed. Got the pocket hole jig set up, and we're just going to put a couple of pocket holes in each of these so that we can tie the whole thing together. Alright, now I've just come back in the van here. I have marked on the floor exactly where the different units are going. So we're going to mark here, that's the centre, and we're going to mark there, which is the centre, and we're going to mark there, which is the centre. And we're just going to take that notch out so that it'll all fit together. I'm using just a little piece of scrap wood here. I'm going to screw this onto it just to guide the router. Okay, so we have all of this all routed up and ready to go. And I've just laid it out on the bench here, and I'm going to start on this corner with those pocket hole screws. Now, I've cut a piece of scrap 6mm because we want to make sure that this channel aligns properly. And what we're going to do here is apply a little bit of glue to the bottom of this, like so. We're going to put that in there. As I say, we're going to make sure that we are aligned properly. That's good. And I'm going to clamp this side of it down because the pocket hole screws can tend to ride up a little bit as you put them in. So before putting them in, it's best to clamp it down. Now, here we have the screw. These have like a square head bit on them, and they're wide so that they don't come through the wood. Like that. Okay, that's looking good. So we'll get another one in there. Okay, so this is all put together now, and just to show you how that looks in the van, we've got our marks on the floor, which we took these measurements from, and if we put that there, that's going to be about it there. Now we'll have some battens to put this way, and we need a wall batten on here, and I think the best bet is probably to put that wall batten in place first, because it's not a straight batten. This van has got this thing going on with it. This is curved. There's quite a few considerations there so far as the back batten goes. So I'm going to measure up for that. It's a little bit complicated, a little bit faffy, but I'll measure up for it and then I'll show you what I've done. I've cut this out so it goes round this pillar. I've also marked the height of this so it's exactly the same height as that, and I've marked the length of it so I know where it's going to stop. We've got the back batten secured to the wall. I've just screwed that through into the side of the van. It's coming round this pillar and following its way back down there. Now I've put the front, I've squared the front up. It's on this line here, and that is square. And I've done the same with that all the way along. Now the reason I've done that is just I want to get these measurements here for these cross battens, and I want them to be fairly precise. I've already done the floor ones, much easier on the floor, but I think I've got this set up, so I'm going to measure these up and we're going to cut them, do the routering on them, and they'll be ready to go in. And to put these on, it's more or less the same deal. We've got the pocket hole screws here. When I come to screw this one, the top of this into the wall batten, I'll do that with screws, that'll be easier, and obviously the floor battens will screw straight through into the floor. We've got both sides of them on now. Again, there's little ones just for where the wheel arch is in the van. Now with that done, the very next thing that we want to do is measure up and cut out the plywood dividers for this. We want to take a measurement from the inside of that, which is 62.5, so I'm going to write it down. And if we slide a bit of the plywood into it and just make sure that this is held square, which is about there, and we make a mark here, and we've got two of them essentially, and that is 5mm. So that gives us 63.5. So I want to cut the boards 63.5 in height, and then we'll cut each individual one a little bit over so we can do the scribing. We'll scribe the backs of them and then cut them to the finished length to go in there. So a whole load of scribing and nibbling later. We've got those three ready to go in. As I say, these are the main dividing panels. These ends will be skinned with the MDF. Put a little line of glue up either side of them, and we're putting the one right along the bottom. So the whole thing will be glued fairly solidly. And that should just slide in there. There it is. Now, last thing we want to do, as I say, is just check for square. This is that. This one, again a touch. That's pretty good. Because once this glue goes off, we're not going to be able to do anything with this if it's not correct. They're all looking good to me. Okay, so this has now been sitting in the workshop overnight. All the glue has dried on these, and the very next thing that we want to do with it is put these dividers in for the drawer section, and there's a couple other things I've thought of to do with it, but I'll put these in first and then we'll go through the rest of it. And I've got to say, this still is, the whole thing is less than 5 kilograms so far, so this is going to be very lightweight. So to put this divider in for the locker, this is going to be like a little hatched locker. We know that the rock and roll bed is going to come about here. So we want this to be higher than the bed. Got 47.5 centimeters there. We do want a little bit of breathing space in there just so the door can open. So I'm going to put the bottom of that at 49 centimeters. Alright, so we have this one in for the locker. I've placed this one in for the top drawer, and what we're going to do is just take a measurement between that and that top piece, which is 42.4. Right, so if we make this mark here, then that's the centre of that. So we'll have two wide drawers at the bottom and a narrow one at the top. Okay, so having cut these battens, put the pocket hole screws in, we're going to put a line of glue on them and align them up, and then we're going to screw them in from the back, and that should all be nice and secure. It's a nice tight fit. A little bit too tight. No, that's okay. Right. Now let me just show you what I'm doing with these drawer runners. This is going to be one here, and it's going to go there. With these, by the way, this wood was just a little bit shorter than this, a little bit narrower, so leaving a lip there. So I've backed this with the only thing I had in the workshop, which was the right depth, and that is a piece of fiberglass. Maybe not orthodox, but it was the only thing I had, and it does do the job. The fiberglass is off, I used to make longbows with fiberglass backings, and I still had some lying around, so that's what that is. Anyhow, I've marked the centre of these spaces, and I've marked the centre of the batten. So I'm going to align that square, and we're just going to mark a line along there and along there. Now we're going to drill this from the back, put that on, and then screw it through, and that's the same for the 6 of those. Alright, this is coming along. We have the drawer runners now secured into this section. We have the fronts of the drawers on. That's all good to go. But there was going to be a change. I mentioned earlier that there was something I was going to do a little bit different on this, and this is this locker section. Previously it was just going to be a hatch here which went right the way down to the floor, but I've had second thoughts, and one of the thoughts is this. Really, this is the tall cupboard, and that's going to have an opening door on the back, and I think for the sake of it I'll just take this piece of wood out here, or most of it. I'll leave some of it in, but take most of it out, and then I'll put a bottom on here for the locker, so you can put stuff in, but it'll only go that far down, and then from underneath you'll be able to slide things full length into there. You know, have these awning poles. They're going to take the full length of that, and they wouldn't just go in there by themselves. So I think for the sake of it, let me turn this around. For the sake of it, we're going to cut that off there, like that, and then we'll have access from the back of there underneath the locker, and the locker here will still exist to put bits and pieces in. That's what we're doing. Okay, so just to show you what I've done with that, I've put the battens in, I've put a shelf on there, and I've cut this section out, the wheel arch section, so that we now have access from the back right the way up to this line here. This obviously will be faced with the MDF. So that all being good, the next thing to do is to consider putting the fridge section on this side. So back in the van, I've put this back in, just placed it in for now, so we can get the right dimensions for the fridge enclosure. Now I have it marked on the floor here. What we've got is there's going to be a piece of 6mm MDF there, and that's going to be faced with one of these battens. So we've got that distance there correct. The other side is going to be the same, the batten, then the 6mm MDF. So what we want for this is a couple of measurements. I'll just put this camera on the floor, steady it so it's not too wobbly. See if I can get that in the shot. There you go, fridge, that's good. What we want is a measurement from the back wall of the van to where we want it to finish here. We have 48 centimetres. So we'll mark that on my rough drawing. And just to make sure, at the top of this, we would also get away with 48 centimetres. There's a slight difference in the wall, but nothing to really worry about. So it's 48 at the top, 48 at the bottom. That's good. Now our next question is, how high do we want this to go? As I say, I'm going to sink this down a little bit so that the worktop is pretty much close to the fridge, and we're going to put the sink here. But I think what I would like is a batten like that across the front of here when we get all that together. So if I put that batten on there and measure up from the floor, that's 57 centimetres. So the height of this panel is 57 centimetres. We want to do the same thing on the other side of this, but it will be different because of the curvature on the wall. So we need to cut these two panels, put the framing on, and then we can fit it to this, or I may just fit that straight in the van. We'll see how that goes. Whilst we're here, and as we're going to be cutting MDF in a moment or two, we might as well measure up for the skin for this front cupboard and cut that at the same time. Alright, so back in the workshop we have a piece of 6mm MDF, and I'm trying to mark out on this all of the pieces that we need to see if we can get it all out of the one sheet. That would be wise economics. So we've got this, I don't know if you can see these lines, they're very faint, but we've got this section here for the front skin which goes over the tall cupboard. We've got one of the fridge sections here, another one of the fridge sections there. This will leave us enough here to do the panel up the back of the tall cupboard facing the back doors, and it'll leave us enough here to do the internal panel which will have the electrics on it. So I'm saying we can get all of that out of one sheet. Now I'm going to start cutting this. I'll just do this by hand. It's only 6mm MDF and it should go fairly readily, I hope. We have the fridge enclosure almost there. These are the side battens which I measured for in the van. Sorry, the side panels which I measured for in the van. I've put a floor panel on there, a floor batten, front batten and a top batten to secure the worktop to. Same with the other side. And now we just want to get some cross battens in there and secure the whole thing up. Alrighty, so the completed fridge housing, this is it. I've put these blocks in so that we can screw the fridge into it. We've got cross battens on. It's a little bit skewed like that, but that will straighten up as we screw this to the floor through these battens. What else can I tell you? We've put some vent holes in just so we can get a circulation of air through there, and I've just filled up the screw holes. So that's ready for sanding, bit of undercoat, be ready to go in the van. So this is the front panel for the tall cupboard in the van, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to cut a sizable square out of the middle of that and radius the corners. As I say, the theme in the van is the radius corner, so that's what's going to happen there. And then we're going to put bungee cord over this so that we can get to it easily and stick stuff in there. It's going to be a big storage cupboard essentially, and that should be ready to fit to the main unit at that point. But first things first, we want to drill all this out of here. Sorry, drill it and jigsaw that out, tidy it all up, put the battens on. Okay, let me show you where we are at with this. As I say, I've cut the hole out. I have put the framing round, and what I'll do, I did this cut with a jigsaw, so if this isn't absolutely flush, what we'll do is we'll sand that back just to the framework once we flip this over. Okay, now just to show you how I finished this, this is obviously the wall panel. I've drilled these holes out so we can put the bungee cord in there, and also any exposed faces. I've just taken a radius on that. I don't know if you can see that, but that just softens all of those edges. Obviously the ones that are putting up to something else I've just left. But any of these exposed edges, the one down here, this here, all nicely radiused and softened. So next thing to do with this, and this is the panel for the switch box and stuff on the other side of this. Next thing to do with it is give it a coat of paint. So I'm going to paint these and then let them go off overnight. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the next one we're going to be looking at making the doors and putting the drawers on, putting all of these catches on and squaring the thing up and getting it ready to fit into the van. So that's coming up next. Then after that, as I say, I'll show you how I made this tap, the sink, put the hob in and fitted the whole thing into the van. Thanks very much for watching. If you liked the video, do give it a thumbs up, and always, do consider subscribing to the channel if you would like to see more videos like this. Thank you very much.